Tubeway Army and Down in the Park from the album Replicas, our classic Six Music album of the day, and I'm very pleased to say Gary Numan is with us. Welcome to the programme.
Thank you.
I remember John Peel playing that track on the radio, which I think was one of the reasons that, and I think I Disconnect From You, were the reasons why I went out and bought the album and saved up for the album rather than just buying the single.
Right.
But John Peel was quite a big supporter of yours.
It was fantastic. Yeah. We did a session as his album was coming out. We did a 3-song session for him then, which was really important. You know, to have John Peel behind you was made a difference.
Yeah.
You know, suddenly people knew who you were. You know, it's not the same as becoming a household name or anything like that, but it was massively important to people that are interested in music and fans of music, as opposed to people that just listen to it in a factory during the day or in a car during the day. You know, it's a different thing. You know, people knew who you were.
I think there's also the idea that it was a better way, in a way, than slogging around the country or playing lots of gigs in London where people weren't really listening particularly. You could find a whole audience of people who themselves were sort of quite isolated, listening in their bedrooms at the time. Yeah,
although I wished I had have slogged around a lot more before it happened. You're becoming successful when you've got no background, really. It's quite a difficult thing to do. You know, you're suddenly... I did a handful of gigs as a punk band.
Yeah.
The last one I ever did was stopped because a massive fight broke out. I only did about 2 or 3 songs anyway.
Yeah.
But the next thing I did after that was Glasgow Apollo, you know, sort of 3,500 people. So I really didn't know what I was doing. I had no stagecraft to speak of whatsoever.
And weirdly, and we'll get to this in a second, but that means the first time a lot of people have seen you live is probably is you standing on the stage of Top of the Pops or the Old Grey Whistle Test or something like that.
Yeah,
I imagine.
Yeah, most people.
We should do some context, because obviously you started out with a couple of singles, but your sound started evolving very quickly, didn't it? Through that sort of first era. There was the first 2 singles on the Beggars label.
Well, they were punk singles. I got signed as a punk band. Tubeway Army was a 3-piece punk band. You know, me doing guitar and singing, bass player and the drummer. We went to a studio to record a punk album, what should have been our debut album as a punk band, and that's where I found a synthesizer for the first time.
Yes. You see, here's the thing. There's a couple of things out of that. One, when you say you signed to a small label, Beggars Banquet, which has obviously grown quite a lot now, but was a relatively small label at the time, isn't it? I mean, based in a record shop.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah, Hogarth Road, Hogarth. Yeah.
So you go in and hand them the demo, and eventually they come back. Did they come and see you in rehearsal or something before they signed?
No, we had a gig in Wardour Street. They came to see us there, I think. Right. The only reason we got the deal in the first place was that my bass player, who was kind of the vocal piece of the band then, I was really quiet and didn't really get involved in that side of it. I just used to write everything. Yeah. He went off to trade in some of his old records, because Beggars Banquet used to do second-hand records. Yeah. And he just got talking to the man behind the counter, was Steve Webman, who's still there.
He is,
in a much better position now. Yeah. Paul mentioned to him, my bass player, that he was in a band and he was been hawking this cassette about and hadn't got anywhere with it. And Steve Webman said, well, the people that own this shop had just started up a little label, give me your cassette and I'll give it to them. And that's kind of how it came about, just through a conversation. I didn't even know Beggars Banquet was a record company at the time. And then they talked to us, and he said that they had no money, and we said, well, look, we've already got a van. My dad's bought us a little PA system, so we don't need that. We've got our own gear already, and we've already recorded these 3 tracks that you're going to, you hopefully put out as a single. So at the moment, we're going to cost you nothing except to get the cover printed, which is why they went for it. And it was an 8% of 90 deal, which they've just improved in the last 6 months. Bless them, after 30 odd years. So I'm on a slightly better deal now with Beggars, but it's that opportunity, isn't it? Yeah, that's all that matters at the time.
And then you go to so it's Spacewood Studios, I think, in Cambridge where you go, and this is where you find the Moog.
Yeah,
is it?
It was the same studio I'd gone to make the demos in the first place before I even knew about Beggars Banquet. So as soon as they said, right, go and make an album, I went straight back to that same place because I knew it, and it was really cheap. I went in, and as we were loading the gear in, I went into the control room, and there was this mini Moog in the corner. I'd never seen a real one before. I had no interest in electronic music at all, really. I had no intention to go in that way.
No.
And
so you didn't walk in, it didn't have a halo around it over the top, like The Simpsons.
No. It's only because I'm very geeky. I like technology type thing. I like pressing buttons and things like that. And that's what attracted me to it. I just thought, that looks interesting. Let's have a look at that. And luckily for me, whoever had it before, had left it on a sound that I really loved. It was a really massive thing. So I pressed this key down, and it was just an amazing thing. It was so massive and powerful, and the whole room shook.
Yeah.
No, honestly, literally shook. No, the seat I was sitting on vibrated, and I thought, oh, that's for me. Yeah, it was one of those moments where it just changed everything for me. And again, really luckily for me, it wasn't taken away. It was there for the next 3 or 4 days, and so I was able to use this thing, and these punk songs that I'd gone there with became changed into like pseudo electro punk pop songs, kind of on the fly. I was having to adapt them as each song came along. We record that one, then we record the next one, and as each one came along, I'd have to adapt the parts that I'd written for guitar and bass onto synth. So I ended up having this sort of mixture of the conventional lineup, conventional instrumentation with this synthesizer element, which for me worked. And that's what I went back to the record company with, this sort of very hastily adapted punk album that was now a pseudo-electronic punk album.
And that gets released as what's sometimes known as the Blue Album, is it?
Yeah,
that's
it went out on Blue vinyl to start with.
So, and that sells out. There was a limited edition, the first run or whatever sells out very quickly. But I imagine at this point, now all you want to do is try and harness the excitement of discovery since, finding this a whole new raft of opportunities.
Well, I didn't know how to play keyboards at all. What I'd done had just been one finger, that sort of stuff.
Well, never stop the human league, come on.
I've never got any better. I'm still pretty much play like that now. But my mum and dad, I still living at home at the time, because I was really young, I was 19 or something. Yeah. They went and bought me an old upright pub piano.
Right. So I was going to say, here's the other thing about, if you discover the whole world of synths at that point, they're not cheap, are they? At that point they were very expensive. Yeah. Someone's got to stump up some cash, or the hire fee.
Well, I didn't own one until I'd made 3 albums.
Really?
Yeah. Well, it takes a while for the money to arrive, So we would, when I made Replicas, for example, I think we were in the studio for, I think it was 5 days, and we only had the synthesizers for the first 2, because beggars didn't have any budget for any more than that, because they were quite expensive to rent. The weird thing was, I didn't know what I was doing at all, and you've only got these machines in for what is hours, really, and you're trying to record an entire album using these things, and so the amount of experimentation that you could do was minimal. So it really was twiddle all these dials, which you had no idea what they did, wait until it made a good noise, record that, and then twiddle away again until it made another good noise in the middle of hundreds of rubbish noises, and then you slowly put this album together. It was the most amateurish thing that you could imagine.
Where do you go? You go to somewhere called Gooseberry Studios, is that right? I think
it was in Chinatown.
Was it?
Yeah, and it had a trapdoor on the side of the road. You lift that up and go down the staircase, and it was I think mostly reggae people used it.
Yeah.
It had a synthesizer. It had their own synth, actually, called an SH2000, a Roland thing. But they drilled a hole through it and put a big chain which had cemented into the wall so you couldn't nick it. That was in there.
How much in your own head, though, obviously you've got minimal time, but pushing and expressing yourself through this new medium, and thinking, well, how far can I go with this? Because Down in the Park becomes the first all synth track that you've ever done.
That's right. Yeah, I wasn't aware that I was trying to sort of push any boundaries, but you're almost doing it by default, because you're using a technology that people haven't used that much before. Just by being there and doing what you're doing, you're kind of breaking new ground in a way. But it didn't feel like that. It was strange how natural it felt to me, and the sounds that we were coming up with were sounds that I'd kind of wanted to hear without realising I'd ever wanted to hear them.
Just talking about the music, and saying it's a sort of voice of discovery. There wasn't, again, contextually, wasn't anyone really doing anything like this. There was the original Ultravox, who sort of were in vaguely the same area, who you were a fan of, I think,
yes,
weren't you?
Very much so, yeah. When I got into synthesizers, I then started to look around, and because for a while I honestly thought I was the only person doing it. Yeah. Because I didn't know of Ultravox, and I didn't know about Human League and these other people that actually have been doing it for quite a bit longer than I had. So there's me going back to record company saying, this is all going to be massive, and I want to be there. I want to be right at the beginning of it, because they didn't want to put that first electronic album out. No. They wanted me to go back to the studio and do the punk album they'd signed me up for. Yeah. So we had a big falling out about it, and eventually they put that Blue album out. But and I was so passionate about it, but I honestly thought I was a voice of one at that point. Yeah. So I then start scouring through the record collection, which was extensive at Beggar's Banquet, obviously. Yeah. And I come across some other things, and Ultravox being one of them. The thing that first struck me was simply the name. I thought it was the most brilliant name for a band when I saw the album cover. And John Foxx looked really cool on the album, so I thought, well, that looks great. Then I looked at the song titles, very different. Hiroshima Monomura, I think, was one of them on one of the albums. Really unusual song titles, and that kind of pulls you in as well. So I found 3 Ultravox albums, which is a bit of a shock to me. I'm just sort of making my first one, and I found this thinking I'm at the cutting edge. And then I found this band that had done 3, and they sounded so accomplished compared to what I've been doing. I was sounding like this real second-rate amateur. I was really embarrassed by it. They really became the band that were already sort of in the mould that I wanted to be.
I think as well it was interesting because everyone was creating their own worlds as well, their own different landscapes.